Welcome to episode 9 of Ryan's Shooting Podcast. Before we get started today, I just wanted to let you all know that if you have been enjoying the content I have been making freely available and would like to voluntarily contribute to the show, there's a way you can do that. To make a donation to this program and to support me as I work towards making the 2016 Olympic shooting team, go to paypal.me/Ryan's Shooting Podcast with no spaces or punctuation. Donating to the show in this way is very simple. All you need is a PayPal account, and if you don't have one of those, it's very simple as well. I figured PayPal would be just about one of the safest ways to do this, as it is such a universally used provider. Anyway, thanks and enjoy this week's episode. Okay, hi there everyone. Welcome back to Ryan's Shooting Podcast. Hopefully you all were able to catch last week's episode because this will be an indirect continuation of that, talking about the next big piece of the mental game of shooting. If you remember last time in episode 8, we were talking about the conscious mind and how to handle your thoughts and use them most effectively in both your training and competition. And, if you'll remember, there are two other pieces of the mental game that we still have yet to cover: the subconscious mind and the self-image. And today we're going to tackle the first of those, the subconscious mind. So, a simple enough first question: what is the subconscious mind? What does it handle? What does it do? The subconscious mind is not where your thoughts are, that's your conscious mind, but it's where your skills are. You may have heard the term muscle memory before, whether it was in reference to the shooting sports, or maybe driving a car, or playing a piece of music on an instrument from memory. Well, what muscle memory really is your subconscious mind in action. It's just another way to describe it. Consider when you were first learning how to shoot, maybe your first day at the range. There are a lot of instructions and things to do, right? I mean, you had to think about where your elbows go, where your face goes on the cheek piece, line up the front sight and the rear sight, line up the target in the front sight, line up the rear sight with your eye, grip the grip just so, pull the trigger on a certain part of your finger. I mean, on and on and on. And we learned last week that our conscious mind can only think about one thing at a time, right? So this was quite a difficult task to do at the range on our first day of shooting ever, because there was no way we could possibly do them all correctly at once. Maybe one at a time, maybe we could skip between them quickly, but definitely not all at once. We were limited by the capabilities of our conscious mind. Okay, so now let's say you've been shooting for a while, maybe a couple years, and maybe you have, a couple hundred hours of training under your belt. You've probably gotten pretty decent at most of the things on that list, and most likely you're not thinking about every one of them in detail for every shot. Maybe a few are still hanging you up, but for the most part, you're doing pretty well. Okay, so now let's say you've been doing this for quite a few years and you have a few thousand hours under your belt. By that amount of time, you're probably used to being at the top of the leaderboards at competitions, and maybe you're even doing pretty well on the national level for your category. And how much detail do you think about all those different technical aspects at this point? Probably not that much, right? Probably barely at all. When you're looking through your sights, you're not thinking, okay, the sights are in the middle, pull the trigger now. What happens? The trigger just goes off when the sights are in the middle of the target, almost as if your trigger finger has a mind of its own. So what happened across these 3 different stages? Well, you repeated a specific action so much that it became a subconscious skill, and you didn't have to think about it anymore. Remember how one of the main principles of the conscious mind is that it can only think about one thing at any given time? Well, a main principle of the subconscious mind is that it can do many things at once. And it can do them all at once very, very well without you having to think about any specific part. Okay, so for a little bit here, let's just take a moment to talk about trying. Effort, giving 110%, that kind of thing. And as a side note, I don't really like the phrase giving 110%. 100% is 100%. There isn't anything more than 100%, but, whatever. For the purposes of this, we'll use it. So everybody always tells you to do that with everything you do, right? Going to college, better give 110%. Running a 100-yard dash, same thing. Starting a business, same thing. Full effort. Playing a game of hockey, 110%. Being in a competitive shooting match, give 110%? Question mark? Hold on now, should this trend really continue when it comes to your shooting? Well, there's a bit of a secret here, and the secret is that it is very nuanced. In other words, when it comes to your shooting, there are some ways that you should not be trying to give 110%, but rather you should be trying to make it as simple as possible and as easy on yourself as you can. Okay, are you confused, or do you think I'm joking? Well, hold on a second and let me explain. First, let's start with where you should be giving all of that effort, 110%. How about being disciplined about going to the range? If you set a schedule for yourself, whether it be going to bed on time, getting up on time, following a nutrition plan, going to the gym, going to the range at a certain time on certain days of the week, put your effort into getting down there at that time and having a disciplined practice. Not one where you spend most of the time chatting with your teammates or fellow shooters, but a good focused practice. Put 110% effort into following your training plan, into being disciplined about shot rejection, those types of things. In fact, the only thing where you do not want to do this trying hard thing is taking your actual shot. Think about a time when you went to a big match. You got there and were like, all right, this is a big match, and I got to do really well. Like maybe I got to make a team, or I want to win, or whatever. So I'm going to work extra hard to make sure that I shoot 10s today. You probably didn't shoot very well that day, did you? Well, why is that? Well, when you say, I'm going to work extra hard to shoot good shots, what that really means is that you are taking the responsibility of shooting the shot away from your subconscious mind and making it the job of your conscious mind. You are trying to think about every little thing, and like we learned before, the conscious mind can only think about one thing at a time. It cannot think about all the little pieces that go into shooting a good shot. It's by definition impossible. So what should we do instead? We learn to trust our subconscious to be able to do the job. Trust rather than try. Once you develop the physical skills necessary to shoot a 10 through conscious practice, those skills become subconscious skills. And the subconscious mind has no problem whatsoever with doing all the necessary physical tasks that are required for shooting a good shot. It's only when you decide to try really hard or really give 110% that you find yourself faltering, because you're trying to take control over what your body already knows how to do without your help. And you and your conscious mind just cannot do as good of a job. The moral of the story here is that you cannot overtrust, but you can always overtry. Well, Ryan, it's a bit scary to think of going to a big match and just trying to let my body shoot the shots on its own. I mean, how do I know it's going to work? And what am I, in my conscious mind, what am I supposed to do? All right, well, yeah, it is a bit, I guess, scary, but you learn to embrace it with more and more match experience, and it gets easier and easier. And what are you supposed to do? You, meaning your conscious mind? Well, you're supposed to help your subconscious along by focusing on specific aspects of your shot. Now, I've been over this before a little bit, but for example, in my matches, what I do is think balance, followed by center, until the shot goes off. This is for standing. Once I get my balance, I can check that off the list, and then all I have to do is keep my conscious mind focused on the center of the target, and I let my subconscious steady the gun, keep the balance, pull the trigger, follow through, and everything else. Just little things like that to keep my conscious mind from wandering off to the wrong things. By thinking balance and center, it's almost like an insurance policy to keep my conscious mind from getting in the way of my shot and messing up what would otherwise be, this perfectly repeated routine. Okay, so now we can move on to the next thing, which is, how do I grow my subconscious abilities? How do I harness that potential that my mind has? Well, we've already covered this too a little bit. We talked about it last week when we discussed how to use your conscious mind for most effective training. And we had the example that had to do with triggering. If you haven't listened to last week's show, I highly suggest you do, by the way. But what we were doing there is consciously training a specific skill, and by doing so, training the subconscious through perfect repetition. We were training the subconscious mind by using the conscious thought on one aspect of a shot. If you do this enough with all the different parts of the shot, then your subconscious can handle the whole thing pretty much on its own. It doesn't need you being your conscious mind, it doesn't need you anymore to do it. Using and trusting your subconscious skill is the key to being technically proficient enough to be able to shoot 10s all the time, or to break clay targets all the time, or to do whatever it is that's in your discipline. Subconscious skill is what allows your body to handle all those different tasks at once that go into making a good shot that you just cannot physically think about all at once using just your conscious mind. Now, the subconscious is not necessarily going to make you a great competitor. We'll get to that more next week. But it is what gives you the ability to shoot good shots on a regular basis and is a critical part of the mental game trifecta. Anyway, again, like last week, I urge you to go out and get Lanny Basham's book With Winning in Mind, where you'll be able to get a lot more detail on the topic of the mental game for the shooting sports. The basis of what I've told you comes from what Lanny basically came up with, but just with more focus on the areas that have been most helpful to me and presented in the way that I think about them. Aside from that, again, please donate to the show if you're interested, as I detailed at the beginning of the episode, and if you have any questions about anything we've covered so far, or have any suggestions for a future show on a topic that you know you want me to cover, please send me an email at olympicshootingpodcast@gmail.com, and I'll try to get back to you in short order. Finally, make sure to catch next week's episode on the final part of Mental Game Strategy for Shooting, where we're going to talk about self-image. What is it? How does it affect my shooting? How do I improve it? And how will it help me shoot better shots and be a better competitor? Bye for now.